Just before I start, a small thank you note to Doreen and Alice for shedding some light on the work of Ladislas Mandel. Type design history is full of unsung heroes, especially national unsung heroes, and I'm really thankful for all the work they've been able to pull together. Ladislas Mandel is a huge influence that I wish I had known better during my study years. Not only as an artistical influence, and you'll see some traces of him in the shapes that I'm about to show you, but also he was one of the first independent type designers, and together with Adrian Frutiger, they helped shape the way our business looks like today. So a big shout out to Doreen and Alice for finally letting us know better about his work and legacy. Well, anyway, so shine bright like a letter. What I'm about to talk about today is a commission that started around 2 years ago for a French car manufacturer called Renault. I'm sure you've heard about it. The brief was kind of simple and started with just like a simple phone call. It was all about having a type that would bear the brand's identity on the car themselves. That means a dimensional typeface, which would act as one of the members of a global brand identity. Now, one could ask why would a brand which has already a strong presence would require new typeface designs? And this is one of the first things that I learned during that project, is that you can actually build a brand consistency in type with many different typefaces all used at once. We like to think that typeface design is a slow process. Most of the time I'm rather against that preconceived idea. And we think that industrial design is a slow process as well. Well, in fact, none of them are, and the turnaround in industrial design can be pretty quick and deceitful in some aspects. Just like we are able to work for several years on something that will in the end be abandoned. I could share that feeling with the industrial designers that I work with at Renault, when they work for 2 years straight on a car that would never hit the streets. So I had to design a typeface for chrome letters. First, my work method is to look around what's already there, whether historically or in the physical world. So I took my photo camera and tried to spot the interesting things that were around in the French territory and around, because Renault is a global brand and has several different names, actually. The trickiest part was not to get into an accident while looking at the cars from close by, because, well, I ride a motorcycle and I got attracted to some nice or ugly shapes on the road, and that would be sometimes tricky trying to chase them. So for instance, this Vivaro thing, it took me 3 different tries and almost an accident to get a proper picture of a Vivaro truck. It's made by Opel. It's one of the nicest volumetric type there is around. Of course, there's a lot of crap, as you can see. By crap, I do not necessarily consider the shape itself, but its relationship with dimensional design. Premium on the top could have been differently handled, although this spiky / roundy design could have been an interesting path. On the other side, the totally soft and honey-like shape Picasso is an absolute disaster, but I think it has more to do with licensing and copyright issues than actual industrial design. I have grown a rather decent collection of volumetric types, photography of volumetric types over the months of that the documentation process took. Sometimes documenting weird stuff like these connected letters. I'll explain a bit more later on why they are connected. Of course, I also try to document the past not only the present of those letters in order to build the new ones, well, the future letters. This would get me to go to a lot of car conventions, like old people having old cars. Of course, I did not discover that it was a huge realm of charming shapes, of all kinds, very that were both connected to. I'm gonna make this louder. That were. Is it working? Is it working? All right. I'm fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So those shapes were deeply connected with their time and place. This is a German lettering from the 60s. I think it's applied on a Porsche, and so on, and so on. Once again, volumetric, three-dimensional. Of course, everybody knows those charming golden American era connected scripts, slightly geometric. This was only used as a reference. I knew I did not want neither the techniques nor the expected IDs to show up in the new letters. So I consciously took the path of trying to avoid as much technical aspects and constraints as possible, be as free as I wanted, and care about the techniques later on. Etc. It's never ending, and the world of car fans is a weird world. We think ourselves as geeks and wholeheartedly people totally committed to type, but you should talk with car geeks. So we had to start somewhere. Renault was already making three-dimensional letters, so we looked at what was already in use. They have their main problem was consistency in the shapes. So there was a design problem, but there was also a budget problem. I'll come down to the budget of industrial type design later, but they wanted simply to streamline the costs and reduce them by having one set of typefaces. So there was this averagely acceptable serif already going on. I'll talk about this one serif a bit later on as well. There was especially those weird half-rounded bio-design thing going on. As you can see on the bottom picture, the eye is connected. The eye dot is connected. That's also a technical constraint. And this is what I was provided with in the first place. The original alphabet, the base alphabet that was used for all things lettering on the car, on the outside and the insides of the cars. Well, my first thought was, cool, there's room for improvement. I actually mean it. I mean, when I get custom commissions, my first question is, are you absolutely sure you want a new design? Because what's not working with what you already have at hand? And are you sure you won't spend several dozen, tens of thousands of euros on a new design? In that case, I didn't ask. It was clear that something needed to be done, and that's what we did. So I'm not going to go too much into the design criticism, but one thing I could tell you is that this was not a typeface. It was an Illustrator board with letters that they would assemble. And the technical vector quality of those shapes was horrible. I mean, a first-year type design student knows better. And of course, you'd say, this will never hit the streets. It's too ugly. Yeah, you're damn sure it did hit the streets. Megane is one of the current most emblematic cars from the Renault catalog. And it was, of course, everywhere. Like, sorry, it's blurry, but doesn't deserve anything better anyway. And then you have weird funky looking, roundy shapes, alternates. They had several W's. I don't know if you paid attention. There's this one W and that one. So it depends on the car also. We kept the idea of having a few alternates mostly for the sake of building small logotypes all across the catalog. But for Twingo, it was somehow relevant. I mean, everybody knows what a Twingo is now. So we had this, we turned it into something, into this, something that has a few hints to the work of Mondel, by the way. Nobody at Renault knows who Mondel is, and they don't really want to know, but they got told nevertheless. Clients love to learn things, and that's one of the greatest things I learned myself. So sharing ideas and design history is, especially talking to a design team. So the initial commission was not to have, well, I was asked to have a set of weights, 3 weights plus italics. And at first I thought, if size matters, I mean, a small car like a Twingo and a big truck, let's not work on weights, let's work on width. Because sometimes it can get very large, and sometimes you have small, compact cars. So a set of weights was rather proposed and accepted. That before and after. The deployment of such an alphabet into a lowercase alphabet was somehow straightforward, like a classic process of taking the basic shapes of the uppercase and applying them on the lowercase. Most of the time, you guys probably know that an alphabet never starts with an A, rather with N and O, but in that case, we started not with the lower cases, but the upper cases. So some shapes are easy to deploy. Some others are more, needs more creative thinking. I really cared about the connections. For example, on the N, I knew that I would get annoyed at some point by an engineer saying, hey, this is too much of a narrow angle and we need to have it easily drilled and machine cut, so we won't make an arch, we'll make a straight line. I was like, no. I don't care about techniques in the first hand. I want to do what's right and then see how we can amend it and apply it. Just like this K, this was the right K for this alphabet, but we had some discussions about it. Widths have different widths, work on different size of cars, requires also combinations of extended and condensed and regular width alphabet. So my work, I'm conscious of my limits. I know that I don't know, or I don't know what I don't know anyway. So I never try to devise a specific weight and think, yeah, the weight is just right. No, I rather work in with a comparative method and try to find the right condensed weight to match the extended. Especially because I knew they had lots of different weird, complicated small logos or words to typeset, like eco2 combinations of letters and numbers and punctuation and different engine types, so very complicated settings. I could not predict if it would be uppercase or lowercase, so everything had also to be done in many different combinations and, of course, kerned all the way, even though kerning in volumetric type is a side consideration. This is the very first volumetric tryout, and this was the very first use of the typeface. It's a small badge that's used to define an engine type, DCI, on some car that would still have the old letterings elsewhere. But there was a big fuss about it, because that would be also the first time that I would introduce the new designs to the head of the design at Renault, Lorenz van der Acker. It's like the final boss of a video game. If you can convince him, then everything's going to be fine. So I was a bit stressed, especially since I had to present my own work, my guts, on stage. A stage a bit like this one, a really huge auditorium with a white screen made of 2 beamers because they also want to project cars on a 1-to-1 scale. That's what it's meant for at Renault headquarters. And a bunch of, like a dozen of white colors sitting in the back, evaluating what I was talking about. So that was the very first meeting. We introduced the new letters with the help of the design team. Of course, it wasn't a question that I would try the new letters on a new car. I was not allowed to learn about the new cars. So Capture was already in the streets, and that was the best way to showcase the work. And that was Lorenz von der Acker's reaction. Everything went smooth. I just want the bolts. All right, so we did the bolts. We extended the family, which means doubling the work. Hopefully, working with interpolation as a design process, it's not so much of a big work. And when we presented the bolts, there was another reaction. It seems like short time. It's actually quite a few months went in between those 2 reactions. So he thought, yeah, italics are nice, but we have wishes for faster cars or small sports cars. Also, sometimes we want the trucks to appear bulky, and sometimes we want them to appear swift and nimble. So we need 2 different italics. I have to confess that in the first place, the italics were designed with the exact same slope so that you could mix and match them across different width. Optically, it's pleasing in a sense that you get consistency, but also you get the feeling that, for instance, the extended weight is not sloped enough, and the condensed is too much sloped, or the other way around. So we did a second italic, so it's plus italic. So we have now tripled the commission. The first row is the initial commission, the 2 first rows, and then we added weights and an extra italic. There's more, but like a lighter weight and etc. But that wasn't shipped for technical reasons mostly. Tech specs, technical reasons. Woo. So what's a technical spec in type design, in industrial type design? Well, we are used to work with Béziers. Drawing 3rd-degree curves is kind of easy, but it's also very limiting, especially when you work with very thin or sloped or very large shapes. You have to put more points, etc. And that's where the Bézier hits the limits. So, of course, the whole work was done with 3rd-degree curves in the beginning, and then converted using another kind of mathematical descriptions of curves, which are clothoids. For those of you who are not familiar with clothoids, this is what a clothoid curve looks like. On the right, you have 2 semicircles and connected one with another, and on the left, and on the right, that's what I'm bad at driving to. And on the right, you have almost the exact same shape done with clothoids. And as you can see, the connection is much smoother, and this is not only pleasing to the eye, it's also much easier to machine engineer, like to have it cut and drilled into a metal mold. Clothoids are used in many, many different ways. This is the shape of a violin head designed by Henri Jay in the mid-17th century. Clothoids are also used in the design of motorways, highways, and this is where everything falls into order, because when you work with curves and curvature, you have to take into account the pace and speed at which you enter the curve, and I'm simultaneously talking about type design and highway design. So this kind of shape was turned and evaluated in 3 dimensions, work with closoids. What you can see here is an actual engineering disaster, especially if you look at the extreme curves on the outer side of the shape. This is not supposed to have all those big dents and differences. So we're talking about a level of corrections of about 5 on 100, 5% correction, while they were usually used to correct shapes. They have a tolerance for a 10% ratio. So I was already happy that I could achieve, I was above their standards by default. Again, this is what happened when you pilot a machine that needs to cut into physical objects your curve that looks so smooth and so neat. Well, it actually isn't, and so on. This all was done in conjunction with the Renault design team. Once again, we like to fancy ourselves type designers as curve geeks, and we're all about shapes and the purest form of drawing. Well, you should talk with product designers, and our world is like just a kid's playground for them. These are the real pros. So how do you turn 2D outlines into volume? What do you have to take into account? Those are actual 3D files that are used to make the letters. How do you render 2-dimensional shapes in 3D? Well, first of all, you have to take into account the base. These letters will be made into plastic. For this, you need a mold, and you inject plastic in it, but you need the letters to be stuck onto the car. So this is actually a 90 degrees angle, so that you can put foam inside it, self-adhesive foam. You also need a clearing angle, so that the letter can be unmolded easily without it to be not stretched but scratched from the unmolding. And then you learn all the difference between the car manufacturers, like Audi is possibly one of the highest standards in those clearing angles. The Chinese manufacturers, for instance, need to have a greater clearing angle, and Renault is halfway in between. The rounding, that's one of my favorite parts. The reason why those letters are rounded is because it's actually design made for humans, and if you have this kind of letters on the front of a car and you have a pedestrian hit, a frontal shock, you don't want your beautiful capital I to turn into a blade. So you round everything ever so slightly. You have the flat surface, which is not so flat. I'll talk about it a bit later. And of course, those tricky little parts where they tell you this angle is not open enough, whatever. It's actually way below the critical standard for unmolding. But anyway. For instance, this K story. So we made a K, okay, like 1 letter, 2 strokes. For them, it would mean doubling the cost of molding if they wanted to have 2 different strokes, 2 different molds. We're talking about a 50,000 euro mold per shape. 50,000. So that would double the price of that one single letter. They were all against that case, saying this is not, the engineers, I mean, saying this is not possible and we cannot achieve it by our technical standards. Luckily enough, I had my secret card with this Nissan Juke lettering proving that it was possible. And Renault and Nissan have an industrial partnership. You know, they share engines and things like that, and processes. So I could prove that this was possible. So they made it. And of course, this is possible. This is a chromed brass prototype. I'll talk about it also later. In several ways with different adaptations. This is the actual final product before it's stuck on the car. As I told you, you don't want your capital I to turn into a blade. That's a nice blade here. We also need to match the minimum width of the letter so that we can have a glue a gluing surface that was big enough so that the letter will not fall off. If you look in the streets, everywhere in Europe where there are Renault cars, you'll see lots of Scenic with the I that's missing. That's because of high pressure washing, and the letter I does not stick enough, so you've got a lot of those cars with an I missing. Learning a lot about plastergy. Plastergy is the injection and compression molding technique. I told you a bit about that just earlier. 5 minutes? Yeah. So there's lots and lots of different ways of making volumetric type. I wrote a whole article on the production type website about it, so I won't go too much into the details. But we had to use a single set of alphabets across all those different techniques, and I'm glad that in the end they are now using a streamlined set of fonts for all things typographic inside and outside of the car. Once again, many different ways of making letters. The main one is, of course, this molding thing. But there were also, I learned a lot about rapid prototyping. This is just two balls that you mix together, and then it dries and gives you nice plastic molds, so you can play with plaster or any kind of material. Those are chromed, then paint is injected with syringes on top of it. So this totally destroys the whole alphabet. As you can see on the energy, DCI, it all rounds everything. And this cannot be addressed by a single design. So right now there's no adaptation planned for this alphabet to address this specific thing, because it's too small and it's too much of a detail for Renault, even though there's a great there's a great interest in the details, of course. I told you about the flat surface of the letters. Of course, they are not flat. They are somehow parabolic because you want the letters to reflect the sky and not the ground. That's why you get all those beautiful gradients of the beautiful photographs of the end product. As you can see here in the R shape, sometimes you cannot control everything, even though I work really, really closely with the people in charge of 3D rendering. It's a team of 3 people only for the rendering of the letters. So that angle could have been handled differently, but anyway. Alternate shapes, not in use. Those are still prototypes. They use it to try words on real scale models. Here you can see the parabolic shape of the letters, and here you have what you're looking at is 50,000 euro worth of chromed brass letters. It's about 500 euro per letter to have them prototyped in one size. So we go back to the metal era. That was also fun to think about. They have several boards with 2 sizes and 2 weights. You also have at the very bottom left corner a U alternate in its natural environment. So one of the nice and fun things about it was how to talk about it, how to communicate about the project. I wanted to make sure that we at Production Type and the Renault design team would both work hand in hand in having the typefaces deployed and documented. And I also wanted to make sure there would be a nice car in the streets that we could showcase and brag about. So June 2013, commission starts. It took us over a year and a half to finish the typefaces, but there were already new cars that were in the plans long before the commission started. And the first car would hit the street in April 2015. This was the car. I'm not using that car to. It's a Renault Kadjar. Sorry. I know I have good creative director at Renault who saw this lecture beforehand, and I'm sorry about this, but I could not use Kadjar to showcase the alphabet, even though it looks all right. I mean, the spacing is also weird, was weirdly handled. Each time I'm telling them not to space things by having equal centimeters between all the letters, but anyway, the alphabet is fully kerned, if you're asking. Then there was this concept car. This will never be in the streets, but it's only here to tell you that Renault is thinking about having pickup trucks either in the South American market, and there are already pickup trucks on the Southern Hemisphere from Renault, but maybe sometime in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So it's nice and all, but it's not the real thing. It's just a concept car. And the nice-looking fellow is, anyway, hello, handsome. Then we have other cars. You've maybe never heard about Quid. It's for the Indian market. I could not use that picture, mostly because they had messed with the spacing too much. I would not even use that picture. It's another alphabet. It's the below average branding alphabet they're using. Then you have Talisman, which was in the streets. It's nice and all. It's the replacement for their previous higher estate executive cars. So it's a new car. It's weird, and it doesn't have an E, and I like E's. So the picture we stored the pictures, recorded them for later. Meanwhile, the alphabet was developed. So we waited once again until Megane, which I told you about, more iconic, comes out. So that would have been September 2015. So we waited. Remember what happened in September 2015? This happened. Maybe it would have not been the right mediatic time to announce this alphabet. I mean, just a feeling. So once again, another alphabet, also with traces of Ladislas model designs. So there was the big Volkswagen scandal, or as we call it, le scandale Volkswagen in French. And we waited until January 2016. Actually, Renault was being investigated by the police at that time. But that was rather national, local news, so we used it. We decided to go public with the alphabet anyway. This is how the actual letters look like right now, and if you own new cars from Renault from April 2015 onwards, you get letters that I'm really proud of, and I'm really proud of the process and the whole working relationship that I've been able to develop with the Renault team. I had feared that working with such a large-scale company would only lead me to interact with stubborn and close-minded people, and the design team at Renault is maybe one of the more welcoming and positive design family I have, beside the type design family, I've ever come across during my years as a typeface designer. So I'm really thankful that we could work hand in hand and produce together an alphabet that is not strictly two-dimensional, that is not strictly three-dimensional, but kind of something halfway in between. That's the great satisfaction about this. Thank you very much.